The knock in the rain. The rain had been falling since evening, steady and cold, the kind that blurred city lights into long, trembling reflections on the road. Sandra stood by the window, watching drops crawl down the glass like tiny rivers, her face half hidden behind the curtain. She was alone in the house again. The silence around her was not peaceful anymore. It was heavy, old, and filled with the weight of things unsaid. She had finished dinner hours ago, but could not remember the taste of it. The clock on the wall ticked softly, marking the quiet distance between moments, between years, between two people who once understood silence together. The sound came suddenly, almost lost in the rain. A knock, soft at first, hesitant, like someone afraid of what waited behind the door. She turned her head slowly, unsure if she had imagined it. The second knock was firmer, deliberate, real. Sandra felt her heart beat faster, a familiar unease rising in her chest. She wasn't expecting anyone, not tonight, not in this weather. She walked toward the door, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor, every step echoing louder in her head. Outside, the rain whispered secrets against the porch. She reached for the handle, paused, and listened. Another knock. Slower this time, as if whoever stood there was tired or unsure they still had the right to be there. When she opened the door, the world tilted. Keanu stood in the rain, drenched from head to toe, water streaming from his hair, his jacket heavy with the storm. His eyes, calm and sad, looked at her the way they once did when words were too small for what they felt. For a moment, neither spoke. The years between them stood like a third person in the doorway. Thunder rolled far away, and the light from inside painted his face in soft gold and shadow. "Hi," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "I didn't know where else to go." Sandra's throat tightened. She wanted to speak, but the past came rushing too fast. Memories of laughter, of the movie sets, of long talks after midnight, of the day he left without goodbye. The pain had faded, or so she believed, until this moment. She stepped aside silently and let him in. The door closed behind him with a dull sound, shutting the storm outside but letting a different kind of storm begin inside. The house smelled of rain and candles. Keanu stood awkwardly in the hallway, his shoulders slightly bent as if carrying invisible weight. He glanced around, noticing the old photograph still hanging, the same piano in the corner, the books piled by the couch. Nothing much had changed except the space between them. She handed him a towel, and he took it gently, his fingers brushing hers for a second too long. It was a small touch, but it felt like time itself paused to breathe. "You look tired," she said finally. "Yeah," he whispered, drying his hair. "I've been driving all night." "Why now?" Her question slipped out before she could stop it. It wasn't angry, only fragile, filled with something deeper than curiosity. He looked down, his jaw tightening. The silence that followed was not empty. It was crowded with everything they had avoided for years. He walked to the living room and sat on the edge of the couch, his hands clasped together. "I heard about your father," he said softly. "I'm sorry I didn't call." "I didn't know how." She nodded slowly, blinking away the heat behind her eyes. "You always know how, Keanu. You just don't." He looked up at her, the guilt visible even in his calm expression. "You're right," he said. "I don't. But I'm here now." The words hung in the air like fragile glass. She sat across from him, her arms wrapped around herself, unsure if she wanted comfort or distance. The sound of the rain softened, becoming almost rhythmic, as if nature itself was waiting for what came next. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Keanu took a deep breath, the kind people take before saying something that costs them. "I didn't come just to say sorry," he said. "I came because something happened." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "What happened?" He hesitated. His fingers trembled only slightly, but enough for her to notice. "Someone from the past reached out," he said. "Someone we both thought was gone," Sandra frowned. "Who?" "Liam." The name hit her like cold water. She leaned back slowly, the room spinning for a second. Liam was a name she had buried long ago. A friend, a colleague, and the reason their friendship had once broken apart. Liam had been the one who said things he shouldn't have, the one who carried a secret that tore them all into pieces. But Liam had died. At least that's what everyone believed. "That's not possible," she said quietly. "Liam's gone." Keanu shook his head. I thought so too. But last week I got a letter. No signature, just a place and a date. It was his handwriting. Her breath caught. What did it say? He looked at her with a calm that didn't match the tension in his voice. It said, "The truth never died." The words sent a chill through the room. Sandra's eyes widened slightly, her heart racing again. And you came here because I think you need to know what that means, he said. And because whatever this is, it's not safe for either of us. She stared at him, trying to read his face, the same face that once told her everything without words. There was no fear in his eyes, only quiet determination and something close to regret. You could have called, she whispered. You didn't have to drive through a storm, he smiled faintly. Some things shouldn't be said through a phone. She looked away, her mind spinning with questions. The sound of thunder rolled closer again, and for a second the lights flickered. She stood up and walked to the window. The street outside was empty except for the rain. Yet, a strange unease crept up her spine as if someone was out there watching. Keanu noticed her glance and rose to his feet. You felt it too? He asked quietly. She nodded slowly. Someone's been calling me for the last few nights, she said. No one speaks. Just silence. He moved closer, his voice low. Then it's starting already. What is? She asked, turning to face him. His eyes met hers, and the weight of what he didn't say filled the space between them. The reason I disappeared, he said softly. The reason we both had to forget. The room fell silent again. Outside, the rain grew heavier, pounding against the glass like impatient fingers. Sandra felt the air grow colder. There was something about his tone that made her realize this was no ordinary visit, no simple apology, no quiet reunion between old friends. Something had followed him here. Something from a time they both promised to leave behind. She took a step closer, her voice trembling. Keanu, what are you not telling me? He opened his mouth to answer, but before he could, a sharp sound broke through the house, a noise from the back door, sudden and distinct, like a handle turning. Both of them froze. The lights flickered again, longer this time. Sandra's breath quickened. Keanu moved toward the kitchen, quiet and alert. The rain outside masked every other sound, but they both heard it. The faint creak of a door slowly opening. Sandra's voice was barely a whisper. Did you lock it? Keanu didn't answer. He just looked back at her, his eyes calm but focused, the way they once were on set before a dangerous scene. He motioned for her to stay back. The air felt thick, electric, like the moment before lightning strikes. Each step he took toward the back of the house felt like walking into the past. The same uncertainty, the same fear of what truth could destroy. When he reached the kitchen, the back door stood half open, swaying slightly in the wind. Rain dripped onto the tiles, forming small, dark puddles. No one was there. Or maybe someone had just left. Keanu stepped outside slowly, scanning the yard. Nothing but rain and shadows. He turned back toward the door, but his eyes caught something small near the threshold. A folded piece of paper, wet and torn at the edges. He picked it up carefully and walked back inside. Sandra waited in the living room, her hands clenched together. He handed her the paper. She unfolded it slowly, her fingers trembling. On the inside, written in the same sharp handwriting, were 4 words. You can't hide again. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with fear and disbelief. He stood still, his expression unreadable. The storm outside roared louder, as if echoing the chaos inside their hearts. And then, almost in a whisper, he said, It's already begun. The lights went out. The message in the dark, the house was swallowed by darkness. Only the rain outside gave shape to the night, tapping against the windows in uneven rhythms. Sandra stood frozen near the couch, her eyes adjusting to the faint outline of Keanu's figure by the window. Somewhere, a branch scraped against the roof, sounding almost like footsteps. The air was thick, heavy with tension, yet Keanu's voice came steady and calm. Don't move, he said softly. Stay where you are. She could hear him moving slowly, his hand brushing against the wall, searching for a flashlight. Her breath trembled in the silence. Then came the sudden metallic sound of a lighter. A small flame appeared, fragile but warm, painting his face in soft orange light. His expression was serious, the kind that told her he wasn't just reacting to fear. He was remembering something that had happened before. The fuse must have blown, he said. But this isn't random. Someone knew exactly when to cut it. Her voice was barely a whisper. Cut it? You think someone's outside? He nodded slowly, his eyes scanning the windows. Not just outside, watching. A shiver ran down her spine. She stepped closer to him, the flame reflecting in her eyes. Keanu, you need to tell me what's going on. You said it's connected to Liam. You said it's not safe. What does that even mean? He looked at her for a long time before answering, as if weighing whether the truth would protect her or destroy her. Liam wasn't just a friend, Sandra. He was part of something, bigger than we realized. What are you talking about? He lowered the lighter and exhaled slowly, his voice low and steady. Years ago, before everything fell apart, Liam was working on a film project that never got finished. It wasn't just a film, it was a story based on real events. About someone powerful, someone who didn't want the truth to come out. When Liam tried to expose it, things started happening. Accidents, threats, disappearances. I tried to keep you out of it. She stared at him, trying to process his words. And you think he's still alive? The letter, he said quietly. The handwriting. It was his. I compared it to the old notes we found back then. It matches. The room fell silent again, except for the rain. She remembered those days, the long nights of writing scripts, the sudden arguments, the strange fear that grew between them after Liam vanished. She had always thought Keanu left because he wanted peace, but now it sounded like he left to protect her. Why didn't you tell me before? She asked, her voice breaking slightly. He looked at her, his eyes heavy with regret. Because you had already lost too much. I thought distance would keep you safe. She turned away, the flame flickering between them. And now you're back, bringing all of it here again. He didn't respond. Instead, he walked toward the back door, the lighter trembling in his hand. He looked down at the folded paper again, the one with the words, "You can't hide again." Something about the handwriting bothered him. It was the same as the letter, but sharper, angrier, as if written in haste. He turned it over, noticing faint marks on the back. He lifted it toward the light, and faintly in the reflection of the flame, another message appeared, written in thin, invisible ink. She doesn't know. His heart sank. He looked back at Sandra, who was standing by the piano, staring at an old photograph of the three of them, him, her, and Liam, taken years ago during the shooting of their first film together. She looked lost, fragile, unaware that the message might be about her. "What does it say?" she asked. He hesitated. "Nothing," he lied. "Just smudges." But she saw the change in his eyes, the way his voice tightened. "Don't lie to me," she said firmly. "I deserve to know." Before he could answer, a bright flash of lightning lit up the room, and for a split second, they both saw a figure outside the window, a shadow standing by the tree line, motionless, facing the house. When the light faded, the figure was gone. Sandra gasped softly. Keanu moved quickly to the window, his eyes scanning the darkness. "He's gone," he said under his breath. But he was there. "Someone's keeping watch. Who would do that?" she whispered. "Someone who knows what we buried." He grabbed a flashlight from a drawer and turned it on, the beam cutting through the dark. "We need to see if there's anything else outside." "Stay here." "No," she said, stepping forward. "If you go, I go." He looked at her, then nodded reluctantly. "All right. But stay close." They moved out onto the porch. The rain had slowed, becoming a mist that clung to everything. The night was quiet, too quiet. The street was empty, the wind still. Keanu's flashlight scanned the ground. Near the mailbox, something glimmered under the wet gravel. He knelt and picked it up, a small silver key with the number 27 carved into it. Sandra frowned. "That's not yours?" "No," he said. "But I've seen this before." "Where?" "Liam's old studio, the one that burned down." The name of the place made her heart race again. She remembered that night vividly, the fire, the news, the disbelief. They had both been there hours before it happened, working on rewrites. She had left early after an argument. The next morning, Liam was gone and the studio was ashes. The police called it an accident. "Keanu never believed them." "You think he left this?" she asked. "Or someone who wants us to find what he left behind," he said. "Either way, this isn't random." They stood there in silence, the rain whispering around them. Keanu looked at the key again, his jaw tight. "This changes everything," he said. "I was supposed to meet someone next week. Maybe this is their way of saying the meeting's moved." "Who were you meeting?" she asked. "Someone who claimed to have Liam's last recordings." Sandra's breath caught. "Recordings?" he nodded. "Videos? Interviews? Maybe proof of what really happened before he vanished?" She looked at him, her face pale under the streetlight. "Keanu, if this is real, whoever's watching us won't stop." "I know," he said quietly. "That's why I came here first. I needed to see you before things got worse." He slipped the key into his pocket and turned toward the house. The storm had left everything soaked, but the night was strangely still now, as if holding its breath. As they stepped back inside, Sandra noticed something on the hallway mirror. A faint smear, almost invisible. She leaned closer and froze. Written in fog, as if by a wet finger, were two words. "Behind you!" She turned sharply, her heart jumping, but there was no one there. Keanu rushed to her side, shining the light across the room. Nothing. Only the flicker of shadows. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "It's a warning," he said quietly. "Not a threat." Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't understand any of this. What do they want from us?" He hesitated before answering. "The truth. The one Liam died for." They sat back down, the weight of the words pressing on them. The candles flickered faintly now, their flames trembling with every small gust. Sandra leaned forward, her elbows on her knees, her voice small but sharp. "If he really is alive, why now? Why after all these years?" Keanu looked into the candlelight, his face half in shadow. Maybe he was waiting for the right moment. Or maybe, he said slowly, he wanted to make sure we remembered what we did. She frowned. "What we did?" He met her eyes, his voice low. "The night of the fire, we weren't supposed to leave. He called us back after you left. I went. And I saw something I never told anyone." The room seemed to stop breathing. Sandra stared at him, her mind racing. "What did you see?" His eyes lowered. "Liam didn't die in that fire." Her body stiffened, her voice trembling. "Then where is he, Keanu?" He shook his head. "That's what we have to find out." A deep silence filled the house again, broken only by the faint ticking of the wall clock. Outside, the rain had almost stopped, but thunder still murmured far in the distance, like a warning that hadn't finished speaking. Sandra stood up and walked to the window once more. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass, tired, frightened, yet strangely resolute. For the first time in years, she felt the same fear that had driven them apart, the same fear that now tied them together again. Behind her, Keanu whispered, "We go to the studio tomorrow." She turned to face him. "And if someone's waiting there?" He smiled faintly, though his eyes carried no comfort. "Then we'll finally know who's been watching." And as lightning flashed one last time outside, illuminating their faces in white light, the truth that both had buried began to stir, alive, restless, and ready to return. The ashes remember, the morning came quietly, but it didn't feel like morning. The clouds still hung low and gray, the air thick with the smell of wet earth and old storms. Sandra hadn't slept at all. She sat by the kitchen table, staring at a half-empty cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The house was still dim, the curtains drawn halfway, letting in just enough light to see Keanu standing by the door, tying his jacket. He looked calm, but his eyes betrayed the same restlessness that kept her awake through the night. "You sure you want to go?" she asked softly. "If we don't," he said, "we'll keep guessing." Liam's message wasn't a coincidence. She nodded, though her chest tightened with unease. The image of the shadow outside, the words on the mirror, and the silver key haunted her every thought. But beneath the fear was something else, something like purpose. For the first time in years, she felt that the silence between them had meaning again. They left the house just after 8. The roads were slick, shining like mirrors under the gray light. Keanu drove in silence, his hands steady on the wheel, his focus unwavering. The radio was off. Only the hum of the engine and the rain's soft return filled the space between them. Sandra watched the raindrops race down the glass, each one merging into another before vanishing, like moments lost to memory. She finally spoke, her voice gentle but heavy. "You really saw him that night, didn't you?" Keanu kept his eyes on the road. Yes. And you never told anyone. No one would have believed me, he said. They said the fire was electrical, but I saw someone leave before the explosion. Liam was with him. Who was the other man? He hesitated.
I don't know.
But Liam called him the director. The word lingered between them like smoke. The director, once a myth in their old circle, a mysterious figure who funded projects quietly and controlled them completely. Some said he was just a rich investor. Others said he used art to hide something darker. No one ever saw his face. Only Liam ever mentioned meeting him, and that was the night before the fire. Sandra's voice broke the silence again. What if this key leads to him? Keanu glanced at her briefly. Then we'll finally know who burned the studio down. The road curved upward toward the hills, where the old studio ruins stood, a forgotten place fenced off by time and warning signs. When they arrived, the wind had picked up again, whispering through the trees like voices of the past. The building, or what remained of it, sat in silence. The walls were blackened, the windows broken, the roof half gone. Grass and vines had started to reclaim the concrete. Sandra stood still for a long time, her throat tightening. It's smaller than I remember, she whispered. Memories always make places look bigger, Keanu said softly. Especially the painful ones. They stepped inside carefully. The air was thick with dust and the faint smell of burnt wood. Broken glass crunched under their shoes. The once bright posters on the wall were now only pale ghosts of color. Sandra's eyes moved across the ruins, catching the faint marks where her dressing room door used to be. She remembered laughter here once, and long nights of work that turned into confession. Now it was only echoes. Keanu led her toward what used to be the recording area, the place where Liam spent most of his nights editing. They stopped near a metal cabinet, half melted but still standing. Keanu knelt and brushed off layers of ash and dirt. Then he pulled the small silver key from his pocket and stared at the rusted lock near the bottom drawer. The number 27 was faintly etched there, too. He looked up at her. You ready? She nodded slowly. Open it! The key turned with a soft click. The drawer creaked as it opened, releasing a faint smell of burned paper and old dust. Inside were fragments of photographs, a few rolls of undeveloped film, and a small black box no bigger than a hand. Keanu lifted it carefully. The metal felt cold, almost too cold for its surroundings. He opened it. Inside lay a small flash drive wrapped in plastic, perfectly preserved. Sandra's eyes widened. After all these years, and he nodded, Liam must have hidden it before the fire. He pocketed the drive carefully and stood up. We can't plug it in here. Too risky. We'll check it somewhere safe. But before they could turn back, a faint noise echoed through the hall. A metallic clang. They froze. Keanu's eyes met hers, and he mouthed one word. Run. They moved quickly, but quietly, stepping through the dark hallway. Another sound followed, a door closing softly somewhere in the back. The place that was supposed to be empty wasn't. Keanu turned off his flashlight and motioned for Sandra to stay behind a broken pillar. Heavy footsteps echoed closer now, slow and deliberate. Then a beam of light swept across the room, cutting through the dust like a blade. Someone was inside with them, holding a flashlight. The beam passed dangerously close to where they hid, then moved toward the far wall. Sandra held her breath. Keanu's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, steadying her trembling. The person stopped near the cabinet they had opened moments earlier. The beam of light lingered there, then turned off. Silence again! Who's there? Keanu's voice echoed through the room, low but commanding. No answer. He stepped forward slowly, his foot brushing against broken debris. The sound was enough. The stranger's light flared on again, pointing straight at him. The figure was tall, wearing a black coat, face hidden under a hood. The stranger didn't move closer, only watched. Sandra's pulse hammered in her ears. She whispered, Keanu, don't... But before she could finish, the figure spoke. The voice was distorted, low, almost mechanical. You shouldn't have come back. Keanu took a cautious step forward. Who are you? The stranger tilted their head slightly. The director remembers his cast. Then, without warning, the light went out again. Total darkness. A scuffle of movement followed, fast and sharp, and then the sound of the back door slamming open. Keanu rushed toward it, but by the time he reached outside, the place was empty. Rain had started falling again, and the sound of a car engine faded into the distance. Sandra appeared behind him, her voice trembling. "Keanu, what did he mean? The director remembers his cast?" He looked into the rain, his face pale, eyes distant. "He means Liam wasn't the only one they wanted." They stood in silence, rain washing over the ruins. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled again. Keanu finally turned to her, his voice quiet but urgent. "We need to see what's on that drive." They left the site quickly, the tension between them thicker than the storm. By the time they reached his car, the clouds had darkened again. He started the engine, but before pulling away, he took out the drive and turned it over in his fingers. "This thing could tell us everything," he said, "or it could destroy what's left of us." She met his eyes. "Either way, we have to see." He nodded and drove away from the ruins, heading toward the small cabin he kept outside the city, his private refuge, a place no one else knew. The drive there was silent except for the rain drumming against the roof. Sandra stared out the window, her reflection faintly visible in the glass. Part of her wanted to believe this was just coincidence. Another part knew better. The past had returned for a reason. When they reached the cabin, Keanu parked under the trees and turned off the lights. The place was small but quiet, hidden deep in the woods. He unlocked the door and led her inside. There was only one light, soft and warm, and a table with a laptop on it. He sat down slowly, inserted the flash drive, and waited. The screen flickered, then showed a single video file labeled only with the word truth. They looked at each other once more before pressing play. The screen came alive with static first. Then an image slowly formed, Liam, sitting in a dimly lit room, his face gaunt but calm. He looked straight into the camera. His voice was tired, heavy, but unmistakably his. "If you're watching this," he said, "then it means the fire didn't end it." Sandra's hand went to her mouth. Keanu leaned forward, frozen. Liam continued, his tone quiet and deliberate. "They'll come for you both when they realize the footage still exists. I kept one copy hidden here, and another somewhere you'll have to remember. Everything started with Project Mirage. The director isn't who you think." He looked around nervously, then whispered, "Trust no one, not even the ones who seem to be saving you." The screen went black. A soft sound echoed through the cabin, the faint hum of a car engine outside. Keanu turned to Sandra, his voice barely audible. "They found us." The cabin in the storm, the rain outside grew louder, turning into a steady roar against the roof. The cabin's single lamp flickered as if reacting to the rising tension inside. Sandra stood near the window, her breath fogging the glass as she looked out into the night. The sound of the car engine idling somewhere beyond the trees felt like a heartbeat that didn't belong to either of them. Keanu had already turned off the lights, the room now lit only by the faint glow of the laptop screen that still displayed Liam's frozen face. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Only the rain filled the silence. Then Sandra whispered, "They're here, aren't they?" Keanu didn't answer immediately. He moved to the wall, reached under a loose wooden board, and pulled out a small metal case. Inside was a flashlight, a phone without SIM, and an old revolver wrapped in cloth. He checked the weapon quickly, then looked at her. "We can't stay," he said softly. "They must have followed us from the studio." She turned toward him, fear and frustration blending in her voice. "Who are they, Keanu? Who keeps following us? Who's the director?" He slipped the gun into his jacket. "I don't know his real name, but I know what he wanted." Liam found something during the filming of Mirage, footage that showed the truth behind the project. It wasn't fiction. It was based on real disappearances, people connected to the studios, silenced after knowing too much. Sandra's eyes widened, her voice trembling. "You mean people actually—" "Yes," he said quietly. Liam recorded some of it. That's why they tried to erase him. She looked back at the laptop. The paused frame of Liam's face seemed to stare right through them. His eyes filled with an expression that felt almost alive. "Then what did he mean when he said not to trust even the ones who try to save us?" Keanu didn't respond. Instead, he walked slowly to the window beside her, peering out through the narrow slit in the curtain. A pair of headlights appeared briefly through the trees, then disappeared again. The engine sound stopped. Silence returned. Too clean, too precise. Whoever was out there knew how to move without being seen. "We need to move," he said. "There's another exit through the back, leads to a small trail down to the river. If we can reach the old bridge, we can get to the main road." Sandra's voice was shaking now. "And the drive. What if we lose it?" He closed the laptop, slipping the flash drive into his pocket. "We won't. It's our only proof." They grabbed their jackets, leaving the light off as they slipped through the back door. The rain hit their faces immediately, cold and sharp. The forest behind the cabin was thick, the path narrow and slick with mud. Keanu held the flashlight low, its beam barely cutting through the mist. Behind them, faint footsteps echoed, too far to see but close enough to know they were being followed. Sandra's heart pounded. "They're coming closer," she whispered. "Keep moving," Keanu said. "Don't look back." They reached the slope that led down toward the river. The rainwater rushed through the small trenches beside the path, making every step slippery. Halfway down, Sandra's foot slid on the wet rock and she stumbled. Keanu caught her just in time, his hand gripping hers tightly. For a brief second, their eyes met in the beam of the flashlight. His calm against her fear, her trust against his silence. "You okay?" he asked, breathless. She nodded. "I'm fine. Go." They reached the bottom where the narrow river curved like a dark ribbon through the forest. The old bridge stood a few yards away, wooden, broken at the edges, half covered in moss. It looked fragile, but it was their only way across. As they approached, the faint sound of voices echoed from the trail behind them. 2, maybe 3 people, moving fast. "Go first," Keanu said, handing her the flashlight. She hesitated. "What about you?" "I'll be right behind." The boards creaked under her weight as she stepped onto the bridge. The river below moved like liquid glass, reflecting the faint light from the sky. She was halfway across when Keanu turned back, raising the gun toward the trail. A shadow appeared at the edge of the path, a man in a raincoat holding a light. Another figure followed behind him. Then, without warning, a shot echoed through the forest. Sandra screamed. The bullet hit the tree beside Keanu, sending splinters across his face. He fired back once, the flash lighting the rain for an instant. One of the figures stumbled and fell. The other ducked behind a tree. "Go!" Keanu shouted. She ran the rest of the way across the bridge, the flashlight beam shaking wildly. When she reached the other side, she turned to see him backing toward her, firing one last shot before diving across the bridge. The wood cracked beneath his feet, splitting loudly. A section of the bridge gave way, sending debris into the river. He barely managed to roll onto solid ground. For a moment, neither spoke. The rain had drowned all sound but the rushing of the river. Keanu lay there, breathing heavily, water dripping from his hair. Sandra knelt beside him, her hands trembling. "Are you hit?" He shook his head. "No. Just close." She looked toward the other side of the bridge. The figures were gone. Only the forest remained, dark and unmoving. "You think they'll try again?" "They won't stop," he said. "Not until they get what's on this drive." They made their way down the river path until they found an old abandoned cabin, a hunting shed, small but dry. Keanu pushed open the door and they went inside. It smelled of wood, rust, and time. He shut the door behind them and dropped his soaked jacket to the floor. "We can rest here," he said, "just for a while." Sandra sank into a corner, her body trembling from the cold and the shock. "This isn't just about Liam, is it?" she asked quietly. Keanu looked at her, hesitating. "No," he said finally. "It's about what we filmed before he disappeared. That last scene, remember the one we shot the night before the fire?" She frowned, thinking back. "The interrogation scene. Yeah. Liam said it would be the most important shot of the movie." "It wasn't fiction," Keanu said. "He used real footage, real people, and one of them was the director himself." Her breath caught. "You're saying he filmed the man behind all of this?" Keanu nodded. "Liam didn't realize it until later. By the time he tried to warn me, they already knew." The cabin creaked softly as wind brushed against the walls. The flashlight flickered, then went out completely. Darkness swallowed them again. Sandra could hear only the rain and Keanu's slow, steady breathing. "Keanu," she whispered, "why did you really come to me that night, after all these years?" He didn't answer at first. His voice came low, tired, and honest. Because you're the only one who ever believed in the truth. And because I knew they'd come for you once they found me. She looked toward where his voice came from, her chest tightening with emotion. So this was never about forgiveness. No, he said softly. It was about protection. The silence stretched long and heavy. Outside, the rain eased slightly, but the forest seemed to hold its breath again. Keanu reached into his pocket and pulled out the flash drive, holding it in his hand. Whatever's on this could end it, he said. But it could also destroy everything we know. Sandra's eyes glimmered in the dark. Then we need to see it. He nodded slowly. There's one more copy Liam mentioned in the video. The one we have is just a piece. The other, he said we'd have to remember where it is. Remember? She asked. What does that mean? Keanu's voice lowered. He once told me if anything ever happened, the real truth would be hidden in the place where silence began. She frowned. The place where silence began. Our first film together, he said. The lake house. Her breath caught again. The lake house wasn't just a memory. It was where they first met, where their friendship started, and where their distance began. It had been abandoned for years, she whispered. You think it's still there? We'll find out, he said quietly. But before he could say more, something hit the window. Soft at first, then again, louder this time. Sandra turned her head sharply. Outside, through the rain-smeared glass, a faint red glow flickered between the trees. Then, a moment later, a voice echoed from somewhere outside, a voice that was calm, familiar, and cold. Keanu, you should have stayed silent. He froze. Sandra's hand went to her mouth. The flashlight flickered once, lighting his face just long enough for her to see it. The realization, the fear and the disbelief. The voice outside spoke again. Closer now. It's been a long time, Sandra whispered. That's Liam. The face in the rain for a long moment, neither of them breathed. The rain outside had turned into a whisper again, steady and cold. But inside the cabin, the air felt dense and unreal. Sandra stood perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the dark window where the faint red glow still flickered between the trees. She knew that voice. Even through the distortion of distance, she knew it. It was the voice that once made her laugh in between takes. The voice that used to calm every storm. It was Liam's voice, but colder, emptier, changed by something that no longer felt human. Keanu moved first, slow and deliberate, reaching for the revolver on the table. His hand was steady, but his eyes were not. Stay behind me, he said quietly. Sandra's voice trembled. Keanu, that's him. That's Liam. I heard it. He's alive. I know, he whispered. But listen to me. If it really is him, he's not the same man anymore. Another sound echoed through the woods. Footsteps, deliberate, wet against the soil. Closer this time. Then, the cabin door creaked once, as if someone brushed against it. Keanu motioned for Sandra to stay silent. He moved closer to the window, his shadow stretching across the wooden floor. Outside, under the flicker of the red light, a figure stood half hidden by rain. It was Liam. He looked almost exactly as he did years ago, only thinner, older, and with eyes that reflected no warmth at all. He wasn't soaked despite the rain. It was as if the storm refused to touch him. He raised his head slightly, meeting Keanu's gaze through the window. For a long, unending second, the two men simply stared at each other, the living proof of betrayal, friendship, and truth standing between them like fire. Sandra stepped forward, unable to hold herself back. Liam, she called out, her voice breaking. It's me. It's Sandra. Please, just tell us what's happening. Liam didn't move. His eyes remained locked on Keanu. Then, in a voice that sounded almost like a memory being replayed, he said, You should have stayed gone. Keanu opened the door slowly, the revolver hidden behind his back. Rain swept in with the wind, cold and sharp. Liam, he said, his voice steady but strained. What are you doing here? Liam smiled faintly, a sad, tired smile. You still don't get it, do you? This was never about me. Sandra moved closer. We saw your video. We know about the director. We know what happened that night. Liam tilted his head. You think you know? but you only saw what I wanted you to see." His words hit her like a stone. "What do you mean?" Keanu took a step forward. "Liam, you're not making sense. If you're alive, why send us that letter? Why make us come here?" Liam's expression hardened. "Because you were supposed to stay away from the truth. But you didn't. And now they're watching again." He turned slightly, looking toward the trees. For the first time, Keanu and Sandra saw them. Two silhouettes standing just beyond the reach of the light, motionless and silent. Their presence was unmistakable, their faces hidden under hoods. Liam looked back at them. "They want the drive, Keanu." "The real one. Not the copy you found." Keanu's eyes narrowed. "You mean this wasn't the original?" Liam shook his head slowly. "No. The one you have was meant to lead you here. It's bait." Before they could respond, a gunshot cracked through the air. Liam stumbled back as the glass behind him shattered. Keanu pulled Sandra down to the floor, shielding her as another shot hit the cabin door. Liam fell to his knees outside, clutching his shoulder. "Liam!" Sandra screamed, but Keanu held her down. "Don't move!" He fired twice through the window, the thunder of the shots swallowed by the storm. The figures in the trees scattered. Liam crawled toward the porch, his hand outstretched, blood mixing with the rain. Keanu rushed out and grabbed him, dragging him inside. Liam coughed, his voice faint but urgent. "Listen to me. The real drive. It's at the lake house." Sandra's eyes widened. "We already guessed that." Liam shook his head, pain twisting his face. "No, not inside the house. Under it. The foundation. The place we buried the time capsule that summer." Keanu leaned closer. "Who's after us, Liam? Who's behind all this?" Liam's eyes fluttered. "The director," he whispered. "He never died. He just changed his name." "To what?" Keanu pressed. Liam looked straight at Sandra now. His next words came slowly, like a final confession. "To someone you already know." Her heart stopped. "What are you talking about?" But before he could answer, his body went still. His eyes stared blankly toward the ceiling, the sound of rain washing over his last breath. Sandra froze, her tears mixing with the rain on her face. Keanu closed Liam's eyes gently, his jaw tight with silent rage. Outside, the forest was quiet again. Too quiet. Then came the faint crunch of boots against wet earth. Someone approaching. Keanu stood, reloading the revolver. "We have to move," he said. "Now!" They ran out the back of the cabin, leaving Liam's body behind. The path ahead was dark and winding, the storm blurring everything into gray. Sandra could barely keep up, but Keanu didn't slow down. Not until they reached the open road, where his car was parked behind a cluster of trees. As they climbed in, Sandra looked back at the woods, her voice trembling. "He said the director changed his name." "What if he meant—" Keanu interrupted softly. "Don't say it." "Not yet." The drive back toward the highway was tense and wordless. Each turn of the road brought back memories of their first film, their laughter, their promise that truth would always come first. Now that promise felt like a curse. When they finally stopped at a gas station outside the city, Sandra sat in silence for a while, staring at the rain hitting the windshield. "Keanu," she whispered, "what if the director isn't who we think? What if Liam meant that the truth was closer to us than we ever imagined?" He looked at her, his voice calm but heavy. "Then we're not just chasing ghosts. We're fighting something that never ended." She turned to face him fully. "Do you trust me?" He nodded slowly. "With my life." She took a deep breath. "Then promise me one thing. No matter what happens at the lake house, no more secrets." He held her gaze. "No more secrets." They sat there in silence as thunder rolled far away again. The storm was moving north, in the same direction as the lake. It felt almost like the past was calling them home. Keanu started the engine, his expression unreadable. His eyes fixed on the road ahead as they pulled away. Neither of them noticed the black car parked a few meters behind them, its headlights off, engine silent. Inside it, a man watched them through the rain. His face remained hidden until lightning flashed across the sky, revealing a scar running from his temple to his jaw. He smiled faintly, whispering to himself. The last act begins. The lake house, the drive to the lake felt endless. The rain had faded into mist, wrapping the world in a pale silence. Dawn was approaching, but the light looked weak, gray, uncertain. like the sky itself didn't want to see what would happen next. Sandra sat quietly, her hands clasped tightly together, staring at the water that appeared through the trees as the car wound down the hill. The lake stretched wide and still, its surface smooth as glass reflecting the faint glow of morning. And there, standing alone at the edge, was the house. It looked almost the same as it did years ago. Weathered wood, empty windows, stillness everywhere. It was the place where everything began. Their first film, their first real friendship, and the first silence that had broken them apart. Keanu parked the car near the gate. For a long moment, they just sat there, neither ready to step out. Sandra broke the silence first. "This place feels like it's been waiting for us." Keanu nodded, his eyes fixed on the reflection of the house in the lake. "Maybe it has." They got out quietly, their footsteps sinking into the soft, damp earth. The air smelled of pine and rain. The wind moved across the surface of the water, gentle but restless, as if carrying whispers that had never been heard. The house groaned faintly as they stepped onto the porch, its boards creaking under their weight. Inside, the air was cold and stale, old furniture covered in white sheets, dust floating in the dim light that filtered through the cracks in the walls. The piano in the corner still stood, though one of its keys was broken. The same one Sandra used to press by accident, laughing every time it made that dull note. Now she ran her fingers over it again, the sound echoing softly like a memory calling from far away. Keanu set the flashlight on the table and pulled out the flash drive. "Liam said the real one's under the foundation," he said quietly. "The same place we buried that time capsule," she nodded. "By the lake, under the stone marker." They walked around to the back of the house where the earth sloped down toward the water. The old marker stone still stood there, half covered in moss, faintly carved with their initials. She knelt beside it, brushing away the dirt with her hands. Beneath it, the ground felt hollow. Keanu started digging with a small shovel he'd brought from the car. Within minutes, the blade hit something hard. He cleared the dirt and lifted out a small rusted box. Its hinges were stiff, but it opened with a sharp creak. Inside, wrapped in an old plastic cover, was another flash drive. Older, darker, but still intact. Sandra stared at it. "This is it." Keanu turned it over in his hand, reading the faint writing scratched on its surface. 3 words, the final scene. He looked up at her. "We watch it here." They went back inside and plugged it into the laptop. The screen flickered once, twice, then came alive. Static. And then Liam's face appeared again, this time younger, calmer, seated in a dimly lit studio. "If you're seeing this," he began, "then you found what I couldn't hide forever." His voice was steady but heavy. The project was never just a film. It was an experiment. The director wanted to test how far belief could go, how much people would give to protect what they thought was fiction. We were part of it, all of us. Keanu and Sandra exchanged a glance. Liam continued, his eyes distant. "They used our friendship, our fame, our trust. Every scene, every emotion we thought we were creating, they filmed it for something else. Real reactions, real fear. It wasn't a movie anymore. It was control." He leaned closer to the camera. "The director told me one thing before the fire. Truth is only dangerous when it's beautiful." That's when I knew what he was doing. He planned to erase us, to make sure no one remembered how real it was. The screen glitched for a moment, then showed another angle, grainy, shaky footage of the studio before the fire. Figures moving in the dark. "A man in a black coat giving orders," Liam's voice returned. "You asked who he is?" "His name used to be David. You knew him as your producer." Sandra's breath caught. "David." She remembered him clearly now. Their producer from the lake house, calm, kind, always behind the camera, always watching. He was the one who brought Liam the project for Mirage. He was the one who convinced them to keep filming even when Liam said it was unsafe. Keanu clenched his jaw. "He was there the night of the fire." On screen, Liam nodded as if answering them directly. "I have one last truth to give you. He's not working alone. The film you thought burned survived. They finished it. They've been showing it to people under a different name." He looked down, his voice trembling. "The name is Silence." The video ended suddenly, leaving only the reflection of their faces on the black screen. Sandra whispered, "So that's why." All those years, the silence between us wasn't just ours. It was built. Keanu turned off the laptop. He used us. He turned our real story into his fiction. Outside, thunder rumbled again, soft but near. They both turned toward the window. A car had stopped near the entrance. The black car. The same one that followed them from the gas station. Keanu stood up, the revolver in his hand. "Stay behind me." The front door creaked open slowly. Footsteps entered, deliberate, confident. And then he appeared. David. The man who once smiled at them behind the camera. Now older, colder, his eyes sharp and colorless. "You found it," he said quietly, almost proud. "I knew you would." Sandra's voice was barely audible. "Why? Why did you do this?" He smiled faintly. "Because truth is nothing without an audience. And you two were my perfect story." Keanu took a step forward. "Liam's dead." "Liam died the day he betrayed me," David said softly. "The man you buried was just what was left." Keanu raised the gun. "It ends now." David didn't flinch. "If you kill me, the film still lives. It's already out there. Thousands have seen it. They just don't know it's real." Sandra stepped closer, her voice shaking but fierce. "Then tell them the truth. End it yourself." He looked at her, and for the first time his expression softened. Not with regret, but with admiration. "You were always the heart of it, Sandra, even when you didn't know." And then, before either of them could react, he reached into his coat and pulled out a small remote. Keanu fired once, the sound echoing through the house like thunder. David fell backward, hitting the floor. The remote slipped from his hand, landing beside the piano. Silence filled the room again, broken only by Sandra's trembling breath. Keanu walked over slowly, his eyes on the remote. It had only one button, red, worn, and faintly blinking. "Don't touch it," she whispered. He picked it up carefully. "It's a transmitter," he said. "Maybe for the files. Maybe for him." They watched the blinking light slow, then stop completely. Outside, the clouds began to part, letting the first true light of morning spill over the lake. Sandra sank onto the old sofa, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's over, isn't it?" Keanu looked at the window, his reflection half in shadow. "No, truth never really ends. It just changes hands." He walked toward her and sat down quietly. For the first time in years, the silence between them wasn't heavy. It was calm, honest. She looked at him with tired eyes. "So that's why you came back that night." He nodded slowly. "Because I couldn't let the story end without you." They sat there for a long time, watching the sunlight move across the floorboards. The air felt lighter now, though the weight of everything they had seen lingered like the final note of a song. After a while, Sandra stood and walked to the piano. She pressed the broken key again, the dull sound filling the room. She smiled faintly. "Some sounds never leave, no matter how long you stay silent." Keanu smiled softly. "Then maybe that's how truth survives." They left the house together, walking down to the lake's edge. The water was calm again, golden under the morning light. As they stood there, the world felt new, raw, real. Somewhere deep beneath the foundation, the last of the lies lay buried with the past. And for the first time in years, the silence between them finally felt like peace.